You know, that feeling. You see someone, maybe they walk into a room or they're just talking, and they seem so comfortable, so there.
Totally present.
Yeah, exactly. And you just think, wow, look at that confidence. You really admire it. Maybe you're even a bit mesmerized.
Right.
But then, well, you look at yourself and it feels like a completely different story, doesn't it?
It often does.
It's like you can give support and encouragement to everyone else so easily. But trying to turn that same belief, that same kind of energy inwards.
Feels like pushing a rock uphill sometimes.
Totally. It's incredibly common, that gap. We're so good at looking outwards.
Right.
Assessing others, reacting.
Yeah, that external focus is almost default. But directing that same kind of focused, positive energy inward, that's often a skill you have to actively build.
Exactly. So why is that? Why is it often easier to see the good in others than to feel really secure in ourselves?
That's a great question.
That's really the core of what we want to dig into today.
Yeah.
We've got this specific source. It's a YouTube video that seems to have struck a chord with a lot of people. And it offers this really fresh take on building confidence. Not as like a performance you put on.
Right. Not just projecting an image. It's much more about cultivating something deep inside, like a real internal sense of your own worth and capability.
Yes. From the ground up, from inside you.
And the insights aren't just abstract ideas. They come with, practical, actual steps you can take.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. To unpack the key nuggets, the main takeaways from this source, to help you take some concrete steps towards building that genuine confidence yourself. Okay, let's go. Let's do it. So let's jump right in. Where does this source say you absolutely have to start?
Right, the foundation. It all comes down to self-knowledge. And not just vaguely knowing yourself. The idea is you have to, study yourself deeply.
Study yourself. Okay, that sounds a bit academic.
Well, maybe, but it means getting really curious about your own behaviors, your emotions, and digging into the why you are the way you are.
Ah, okay. So less like homework, more like exploration.
Exactly. And the source argues there's huge power in that, because when you truly know yourself, your internal landscape,
you can stand confidently in who you are.
Yeah. You understand your strengths, sure, but you also get why you have certain challenges, what areas you're working on, and crucially, why those are challenges for you.
Okay, and that internal anchor, that knowing, it makes you less swayed by what others think.
Precisely. You're less vulnerable to, say, manipulation or just constantly trying to fit in because you know where you stand. You're not just adapting based on external expectations.
That makes sense. The force actually points out that you can often spot people who maybe lack that deep self-knowledge because they are easily swayed, right? We're taken advantage of.
Because they might be looking for that validation externally instead of finding it internally.
Something that really stood out to me from the source was this whole point about understanding your past experiences.
Oh, yeah, the trauma aspect.
Right. The speaker shared her own journey and how healing trauma totally shifted her view. Like, instead of seeing past behaviors as just crazy,
she realized they were responses, understandable responses to being hurt.
Exactly. Linked to specific things that happened. And that understanding, connecting the dots between, then and now, that was massive for her confidence.
It's a huge step. It stops you from letting others define you by those past labels, like crazy.
And it reframes it, doesn't it? From I'm flawed to I reacted understandably to a difficult situation.
That validation is incredibly powerful for healing.
Yeah.
And just for moving forward with more self-compassion.
Okay, so this studying yourself, how do you actually do it? What are the practical things the source suggests?
Okay, so she gives a few key methods.
Right.
First up, journaling. But not just random diary entries. She suggests using specific prompts focused on introspection. Things like shadow work questions or just general journaling questions. Questions about myself.
Where do you find those?
Well, she mentions looking on places like Pinterest or specific Instagram accounts. She even mentions her own at Thewizardliz has resources like that.
Gotcha.
The main goal isn't like solving everything in one go. It's about consistently engaging with these questions, getting to know yourself little by little, more and more.
That feels manageable.
Yeah.
A process, not a huge mountain to climb all at once.
Exactly. Then another tool she found really helpful was therapy. For her, therapy was incredibly validating, especially, she mentions, after dealing with gaslighting. It helped her feel, in her words, sane.
How so?
By providing that crucial context, connecting her present feelings and patterns back to past events. Like, you were this way because this happened.
Right. Understanding the why behind maybe difficult patterns. It's presented as a tool for healing and that deeper understanding.
Yeah, and the source does touch on, platforms that can help you find a therapist. It mentions things like online access, questionnaires to help find a good match, and importantly, the option to switch if it's not the right fit. Just reporting impartially here, that's information shared in the source itself about accessing that kind of help.
Okay. So beyond those structured things like journaling or therapy, what else?
Well, there's a more fundamental practice the source really emphasizes, just constantly asking yourself why.
Why?
Yeah, why do I feel this way right now? Why does this issue keep popping up for me? Why do I have this habit or even this addiction?
Cultivating that deep curiosity about your own inner world.
Exactly. She shared a really powerful personal example about realizing her past eating disorder wasn't just some generic mental health issue.
It was linked to trauma.
Profoundly linked to specific trauma. Yeah. And she felt that if she'd understood that why much earlier, she would sought the right kind of help, sooner.
Wow. That really highlights it, doesn't it? Sometimes these difficult behaviors, they aren't just normal or the way I am. There's often a deeper reason you can uncover.
Right. It's not always just how things are. There's usually a root cause.
Okay. And there was one more piece to this self-knowledge puzzle.
Yes. Educating yourself.
Oh.
Reading books, specifically books about subjects that help you understand, human behavior, psychology, trauma.
Things relevant to your own experience.
Exactly. She mentions reading The Body Keeps the Score, for instance, and how it gave her this scientific validation for how trauma affects brain wiring. That was a huge aha moment for her.
Like finding external validation for your internal experience.
Precisely. And this leads to a point she makes that feels really, really fundamental.
Which is?
That you are the best subject you will ever study, the absolute best investment you can ever make.
Why is that?
Because knowledge and intelligence, those are the only things, she argues, that absolutely cannot be taken away from you.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Possessions can go, people can try to diminish you.
But what you've learned about yourself and the world, that's yours. Untouchable.
That really reframes self-education, doesn't it? It's not a chore. It's like building this inner wealth that no one can touch.
Exactly. It's empowering.
Okay, so we've got this foundation. Deep self-knowledge. Starting that journey. What's next? The source says understanding isn't enough. Right.
The next critical piece is action. Taking that understanding and actually doing something with it. And she links this directly to dedication.
Dedication. How so?
Well, the core idea here is that confident people, they're almost always dedicated to something. Could be a goal, a hobby, even just a personal routine.
Something they consistently show up for.
Exactly. That dedication provides structure. It gives you purpose, a sense of momentum.
And the flip side, if you lack dedication in one area, say something seemingly small like a morning routine.
That feeling of instability, she suggests, can kind of leak into other parts of your life. Maybe even your relationships start feeling less stable.
Interesting. It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah, and she asks this really direct question. If you aren't actively doing anything, if you don't have goals you're working towards or hobbies you're pursuing,
what is there to be confident about?
Right. Dedication gives you substance. It gives you something real to build on, something genuine to feel good about and even talk about.
That totally resonates. Confidence isn't just like thinking you're great in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's often tied to feeling capable, seeing progress.
Definitely. But the source adds another important layer here, referencing Lisa Nichols. It's about true confidence coming from trusting your ability to
bounce back from anything.
Yes, that's a really crucial shift in perspective. It moves away from needing everything to be perfect or right the first time.
Because that pressure is paralyzing.
Totally. It's not about waiting for the perfect moment or for the plan to be flawless, which she points out never happens anyway.
Right. Perfection doesn't exist.
So it's about just starting, taking the leap, trying something, and having that deep inner knowing that even if you fall flat on your face,
you can handle it.
Yeah.
You can learn, adjust, try something else.
Exactly. You have the resilience. That takes so much pressure off.
It really does. Okay, so speaking of taking action, one specific type of action the source really highlights is movement, exercise, sports.
And importantly, it's not just about changing how you look, although that can be a perfectly valid goal too.
The focus is more internal.
Yeah, the emphasis is on the internal benefits, that dopamine release, the feel-good brain chemical.
And that feeling of accomplishment.
Oh, absolutely. That pure, undeniable feeling you get when you finish a workout, especially on a day you really didn't want to do it.
We've all been there.
Right. Pushing through that resistance builds actual self-belief. It makes you think, I did that. What more am I capable of?
It's like confidence built through tangible effort and discipline.
Totally. And she suggests all sorts of things: finding a sport you enjoy, trying Pilates, strength training, even just committing to regular walks.
Anything that gives you that sense of mastery.
Exactly. That sense of accomplishment, mastering your own body and will, contributes directly to that intrinsic earned confidence.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense. Know yourself.
Yeah.
Take dedicated action. Now, how does this all play out with other people? Our relationships, setting boundaries? The source has some pretty direct thoughts here, too.
She definitely does. She makes this very strong statement. Your friend group is you.
Ooh, okay. Unpack that a bit.
Well, the argument is basically that if you mainly hang out with people who are insecure, you're likely to stay stuck in that same cycle yourself.
Because you're sharing that energy, those perspectives.
Yeah, the shared energy, the limitations, the way you talk about yourselves and the world, it can kind of keep everyone down.
That's a little tough to hear, maybe.
Okay.
Is she saying ditch your friends if they're struggling?
No, not necessarily abandon them, but she strongly advises that you also make an effort to cultivate relationships with people you genuinely look up to.
People who are confident.
People who are confident, people you feel you can learn from. And yeah, hanging out with really confident people might feel uncomfortable at first.
Because it shines a light on your own stuff.
Maybe. It definitely challenges your comfort zone. But the idea is that their confidence can actually rub off on you. You start to absorb it.
Interesting. And she made a point about this not being about looks.
Yes, a fascinating point. She notes that some of the most, conventionally beautiful people she knows are actually deeply insecure.
Huh.
While other people who might not fit those traditional beauty standards, but who just radiate confidence, they're often seen as the hottest or most attractive people in the room.
Because of that self-possession, that presence.
Exactly. That internal quality really does shine through.
Okay, so choose your company wisely, or at least consciously. What else in terms of navigating relationships?
Another huge piece, according to the source, is learning to respond from your heart, not your ego.
Heart, not ego. What does that mean practically?
Well, the main practical outcome is learning to stop taking things so personally.
Easier said than done, though, right?
For sure. But the source offers a way to practice this. Try to view negative comments or actions from others through a different lens.
Like how?
Like maybe understanding that they're speaking from their own pain, their own limitations. Maybe they're acting out of being, as she puts it, damaged souls who need healing themselves.
So shifting the perspective. It's not necessarily about me. It might be about them.
Exactly. That shift can create space for a bit more compassion, maybe. But crucially, it dramatically reduces that knee-jerk reaction to take it as a personal attack. Your perception of why they're doing it is key.
That makes sense. It diffuses the sting a bit.
Mm-hmm. And directly connected to not taking things personally is the absolute necessity, she argues, of speaking up for yourself.
This is a big one.
Huge. Presented as a non-negotiable step for building confidence and just honoring yourself.
What kinds of examples does she give?
Relatable ones, like learning to politely but clearly say no when you genuinely don't like something. Maybe it's food at a restaurant or a service you received.
Instead of just pretending it's fine to avoid conflict.
Exactly. She contrasts this with her own past people-pleasing, where she'd say everything was great even if she was inwardly fuming or upset, like crying about a terrible haircut after telling the stylist she loved it.
Oh, man. I think many people can relate to that.
Right. So it's about validating your own feelings and preferences in the moment. She really emphasizes that saying no is okay. Most of the time, people just accept it and move on.
It's not the catastrophe we build it up to be in our heads.
Usually not. And this act, speaking your truth, it also feels like you're validating that, that inner child or that past version of you who didn't feel safe enough or empowered enough to speak up.
It's like reclaiming your voice.
It really is. No, I don't want to do it. That's a complete sentence, she implies.
Love that. Okay, and there was one more point under this relationship boundaries theme about space.
Ah, yes. Challenging the very idea that you should be afraid of taking up too much space.
What does she mean by that?
She just flat out rejects the notion that you can somehow be too much. If other people feel uncomfortable around you when you're just being your authentic self,
that might be their issue.
That's her suggestion. Maybe it's about them not being able to match your energy, not proof that you need to shrink yourself down.
So the advice is, don't dim your own light. Don't make yourself smaller to make others feel comfortable.
Exactly. Because, she argues, it usually doesn't actually help them in the long run, and it definitely makes you feel less than. She shared that example of questioning why she'd avoid wearing makeup just so she wouldn't look like she was trying too hard.
Right. It's about owning your presence fully and authentically without apology.
Your space is yours.
Yeah.
Inhabit it.
That flows perfectly into the final big area we pulled from the source. Really cultivating a strong inner world of confidence. And it kicks off, again, with authenticity.
Yes. Stop trying to be someone else.
Why is that so detrimental?
Well, the source argues that when you try to copy someone else, their style, their way of talking, their whole vibe, you automatically become a lesser version of them.
Claire.
But maybe more damaging is the message you send to yourself. On a deep level, you're telling yourself, I am not good enough as I am.
Because you think they are good enough,
Yeah.
and you need to be like them.
Exactly. So get inspiration, sure, but don't just imitate. Integrate ideas, but embrace what makes you uniquely you, which, of course, loops right back to that first point about knowing yourself.
It all connects. What else for the inner world?
There's a really strong message to actively kill embarrassment.
Kill embarrassment. How?
By consciously refusing to feel embarrassed about who you are, about your past, about your vulnerabilities.
Okay.
She uses her own experience as an example, talking publicly about really personal traumas. She chooses to see that openness not as something shameful, but as a sign of incredible strength.
Especially compared to anyone who might judge her for it.
Right. She's basically saying, I won't let embarrassment have power over me, choosing vulnerability over shame.
That takes courage, but I can see how it builds confidence. You're taking control of the narrative.
Exactly. Sharing vulnerability openly can actually disarm judgment and reframe things. Shame becomes strength.
Powerful. What else indicates confidence, according to this source?
Another key marker, linked to intelligence as well, is the willingness to learn. And crucially, the humility to admit when you don't know something.
Ah, so confidence isn't pretending you know everything.
Quite the opposite. Truly confident, truly intelligent people aren't afraid to say, I don't know. The source actually shares her own strategy.
Which is?
If she's in a situation where a subject comes up that she knows nothing about, she'll just admit it, and then she'll ask the other person to teach her.
Oh, that's smart. So you admit the gap, but then you actively try to fill it.
Exactly. You gain knowledge, you connect with the other person, and you build confidence by learning. It's a win-win-win.
She also included that interesting little side note about humans maybe not using their full brain capacity.
Yeah, it was a bit speculative, but it kind of hinted at this vast, untapped potential we all have, accessible through continuous learning.
Framing knowledge-seeking as unlocking more of yourself.
Right, which naturally boosts confidence.
Okay, next up, something the source is clearly a huge advocate for. Positive affirmations.
Oh, yes, absolutely. She argues that our minds kind of naturally lean towards negativity, right? The worry, the self-criticism, it's a default setting for many.
The negativity bias.
Exactly. So listening to or repeating positive affirmations is presented as a deliberate practice to counteract that, to consciously shift your internal dialogue.
Does it really work?
Well, she shares her own experience, saying listening to her own affirmation recordings genuinely helps her feel more confident, and even, in her words, feel more attractive.
So even if you don't fully believe I am powerful the first time you say it,
the idea is you keep repeating it. You start to internalize it. Your internal state begins to shift. You might start acting in more powerful ways, feeling it more, and maybe even attracting circumstances that align with that feeling.
the mind as a tool for shaping reality.
That's the core concept. You're actively programming your internal landscape instead of just letting old negative patterns run the show.
Okay. And bringing all these inner qualities together. What's the ultimate picture of a truly confident person, according to this source?
It comes down to being authentically themselves and also being humble.
Authenticity and humility.
Yeah.
Interesting combo.
Yeah. Their sense of self-worth isn't built on shaky ground, like external validation, fame, status, how many likes they get.
Because that stuff is fragile.
Right.
It can disappear.
Exactly. Relying on outside approval for your confidence, that's like building your house on sand. It'll crumble eventually.
So where does true confidence come from?
From within. From genuine self-love. She puts it simply, I love myself, and that is all that matters. And humble people, she notes, don't feel that constant need to perform or prove themselves no matter who they're with. They're just comfortable being themselves in any setting.
That internal validation is the unshakable foundation.
That's the goal.
Okay, so, wow, we've covered a lot of ground here, drawing from this one source. What does this all mean for you, the listener? We've really journeyed through these key ideas, haven't we?
We definitely have. From that absolute necessity of deep self-knowledge, understanding your roots.
Right, through the power of actually taking action, being dedicated, setting those clear boundaries in your relationship.
All the way to deliberately cultivating that strong, authentic inner mindset, using tools like affirmations, killing embarrassment.
It really is a holistic approach, isn't it? It looks way beyond just quick fixes or surface-level changes.
It's about building something real and sustainable from the inside out.
So this deep dive, pulling out these insights, hopefully offers you some concrete, actionable steps you can explore right now on your own unique path towards building that deep, real, unshakable confidence.
And it's not about becoming someone you're not. It's about fully stepping into and celebrating the person you already authentically are.
Exactly. And the source leaves us with this really powerful, maybe even a provocative final thought, a belief that seems to underpin her own resilience.
Yeah, that capacity to bounce back she talked about.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the belief that God, the universe, life, whatever you believe in, wants you to win.
That's a big one.
It is. The source argues we're not just put here to suffer. Life actually intends for us to learn, to evolve, to succeed.
It's this perspective that there's actually a force out there rooting for you, that support is available if you're open to asking for it, and if you can believe it's possible.
Just sit with that for a moment.
Yeah.
What if, on the most fundamental level, life is on your side?
How might that change things?
Right. How might holding that belief, even just as a possibility, shift how you face challenges, your willingness to take risks, your capacity for self-compassion when things get tough?
It could be a profound source of strength in itself.
Absolutely. That's a really powerful thought to carry with you as you continue your own deep dive into becoming more confident in the incredible person you already are.